Cobra Pose. If you are looking for an asana to counteract hours of hunching over a computer all day at a desk, this is the simple, beginner-friendly, risk-free back bend pose for you. Cobra Pose is so much more accessible than those other more intimidating postures like wheel pose or dancer or even upward dog. It comes with a lot less risks and it can help you to alleviate lower back pain, upper back pain, herniated discs, or to stretch open your abdominals and open your heart. I'm Logan Haley and welcome back to the Yoga Nomads. Today we are talking everything Bhujangasana or Cobra Pose. Now this posture is inspired by the king cobra, which is a majestic snake that can glide forward and keep its upper body lifted while the lower body remains coiled or moving along the ground. And the king cobra, interestingly, is called the king because it actually eats other cobras. So this is a very powerful pose and you can embody that strength and power while also feeling a little bit of relaxation and restorative action. It's not quite as activated as upward dog, where you are typically lifting from the floor and engaging those glutes really tight. Instead, Cobra Pose, your thighs are staying planted, your feet are staying down, and you're focusing on this light lift that's using those back muscles, opening up the clavicle, lowering the shoulders, but not overarching in this unnatural arch. So today I'm gonna show you how you can practice Cobra Pose in the proper form so you don't risk any of those injuries, you don't overarch your back or over clench your glutes, and you can actually reap all the benefits. So the benefits of Cobra Pose happen in two different ways. You're getting that front opening, right? Where you're getting your heart opening, your chest stretching, your hamstrings getting a light stretch, your clavicle, your biceps and triceps are engaged and also pushing back, and even a slight abdominal stretch. And then at the same time, you're engaging the backs of your legs for some strengthening. All of this is going to improve your posture, strengthen your back, strengthen your leg muscles, and also alleviate back pain, again, through that upper body opening. So when we're in Cobra, we're rolling our shoulders back and down, which is just creating this massive heart opening that can help alleviate symptoms of depression, anxiety, stress, etc. All of these benefits are backed by science and they're actually linked below in our complete guide to Cobra Pose. We have guides to almost every yoga pose out there over on our website, theyoganomads.com, as well as product reviews, tons of information about chakras and spirituality, how to find more balance in your yoga practice, etc. So you definitely want to go check that out. Now, moving into how to actually perform Bhujangasana, I want to walk you through how to safely get into the pose, and then we'll talk about some variations, some modifications, and some common mistakes that you'll want to avoid so you don't end up hurting your back. So getting into Cobra Pose is very straightforward, but if you don't want a super intense back bend, you can start in low Cobra, which is the most accessible version. Now you can enter the pose from a downward dog, from a plank pose, but I'm gonna actually show you how to just come into it from the floor. So start by laying face down on the floor with your legs extended behind you, and allow your feet to come about hip width apart and point your toes to the back of the room, tops of the feet on the mat. You don't want your feet like this, you want them like this. Next, you're gonna place your hands right under your shoulders. Keep those fingers spread apart so you have some nice yogi fingers. And then notice that your shoulders aren't like shrugging up in any awkward way. You should just be subtly relaxed and your collarbones should be just open and wide, okay? So from the front, that's gonna look like this. Okay, and this is before we're coming up. We're just kind of getting settled. We actually don't want to kink our neck up. I'm just doing that to look at you, but you kind of keep your gaze towards the floor, okay? So next up, I'm just gonna feel my pubic bone pressing into the floor, my hips, creating this solid foundation, okay? On an inhale, lightly press your palms into the floor, and then slowly lift your chest and your head off the floor. Your lower ribs are gonna stay down, okay? And you want your elbows to stay tucked to the side. It's very important that you don't like press up and do this crazy arch and hurt yourself, okay? You want to ease into this. So if we're starting here on an inhale, we're pressing, our shoulders are back and down, and we're doing this subtle movement. It may not look like much, but you can already start to feel that opening. The shoulder blades are sliding down the back towards the spine, my chest is expanding, and I'm actually keeping my gaze just more in front of the mat, not up where I'm kinking my neck. So my neck, I want to stay long, all right? So once you're here, just keep breathing for a minute. Don't hold your breath. You can continue inhaling, and then I can show you how to move into the extended Bhujangasana. This is a great place to stay and just hang out, feeling that a little bit of work in the muscles of the back and breathing, and you can come up a little further. Again, you're not overarching because you're staying engaged. You're just keeping this nice, subtle back bend in the upper body. You should be able to support this even if you lifted your hands from the mat. Okay, that's kind of a key to know. If I was overarching and like not supporting and I just like flopped, I can do this because I'm flexible, but I've actually really hurt myself doing this, so you don't want to do it too often. But see how I'm in this? I could not like lift my hands up. I can't support that. When I'm building the right foundation, I know I'm not going too far back because I could lift my hands and I could actually stay in this posture. My spine and my back muscles are able to support me at that point. You know you're overarching when you can't lift your hands up and you're kind of flopping into it, okay? All right, so if you suffer from any sort of low back pain or neck tension or anything like that, I want you to stay here in low cobra. If you want a bigger stretch and you feel like your spine is warmed up and you're ready to improve your flexibility, you can move into full cobra. But again, we want to start with a solid foundation, so we'll check that alignment one more time. Okay, my spine should be neutral all the way up through the neck with the crown of the head forward, okay? I am only looking up to talk to you guys, but you do not want to practice this pose with a kinked neck. Everything is about elongation. So I've got my crown forward. I've got my palms pressing in. I don't have my shoulders shrugged up. I have them rolled back and down. And I've got my feet and my thighs and my hips pressing into the floor, okay? My ribs are staying on the ground. On an inhale, I can begin to push up a little bit, but again, I'm not forcing upwards. I'm keeping my hands without holding the majority of my weight. I'm keeping my back muscles engaged, my core engaged, so I'm lifting from a place of strength rather than a place of flop. So I want you to pay attention as I move into a extended Cobra Pose. I'm engaged everywhere in my lower body. I can look up. I can keep my neck straight, my heart is open, my collarbones and my shoulders are back, my chest is relieved and my spine is extended, but I am not flopping into my spine. So here I am engaged. Look at what it looks like when I'm floppy, okay, ready? That's like a kink in the lower spine. Those vertebrae just it's just not gonna feel good, okay? So if we really want to build flexibility from a place of strength, you have to make sure that you're checking all these things ahead of time, because trust me, you can hurt your back. I have hurt my back by just trying to show off and be like, ooh, look at me. And that's not really building flexibility. That's actually creating just an unnecessary rubbing of your vertebrae, and again, like that crunching, kinking kind of feeling in your spine, and that is definitely not what we want to be doing in our yoga practice. So moving in an extended Cobra, if you want to try it with me, we're settling into our low Cobra. Our neck is extended. On an inhale, we're slowly beginning to press up with all of our lower body engaged, our back engaged, and coming into our flexibility with a strong foundation. My core is engaged to protect my low back. And I'm only going up to where this is still comfortable, okay? There's no need to like straighten out your arms all the way or force this in any way. We want to move slow. And you'll see once again, as I'm coming up, I could almost take the weight out of my hands because so much of this is actually building those muscles along my back. These muscles are engaged instead of just relying solely on a floppy, flexibility only. Whenever you are strengthening your muscles around the muscles that are being stretched, you're actually building a more longevity in your flexibility, essentially. You're not just arching into this thing, but you're building all the support systems alongside it. So, moving into my top tips for mastering Cobra Pose, I want you to know the difference between Cobra Pose and upward dog, because these two are commonly confused, and rightfully so. They do look similar at a glance. But when we're in Cobra Pose, most of our body is actually staying on the floor. We are engaged, but we are staying predominantly with our lower body glued to the floor and keeping this slight bend in the elbows. Wherever you are in this range of motion, your elbows are keeping a slight bend. Now, when you're doing a downward dog, it feels natural to come into it from an up dog in our classic Sun Salutation to a plank pose to a chaturanga, and then an upward dog. You can see the difference here. One, my legs, my thighs are totally engaged and they're lifted from the ground. Two, my arms are fully extended, okay? Remember, Cobra Pose, I was down on the floor. Up dog, I'm lifted and I'm feeling a lot of action in that lower body. I'm looking upwards and everything's engaged. It's hard to hold here and talk. Cobra Pose, I could hang out here and talk. It's not nearly as challenging on your muscles, though you are still activating them, but it's more flexibility focused. So one more time, we've got Cobra Pose, and then we've got upward dog, okay? You can see the difference there. Tip number 2, I've mentioned before, but I'll say it again, you shouldn't have a ton of weight in your hands. You saw in upward dog how I actually have a ton of weight. I'm holding my upper body here, my legs are lifted from the mat, everything is engaged in upward dog. But in Cobra Pose, I can actually kind of lift my hands off of the mat because I'm mostly using my back muscles. So you can see, if I come up a little further, and that's how we know we're not overextending. If you're pushing in your hands and arching up like this, you're not in that solid foundation of a strong, fierce cobra that's gonna eat other cobras, okay? You should not have very much weight in your hands. So you can always do that check. Tip number 3, I want you to squeeze your shoulder blades together behind you. So if you could imagine being in Cobra Pose like this, if your shoulders were shrugged up, there's no way to squeeze your shoulder blades down. But when they're rolled back and your shoulder blades are coming together and your elbows are glued to your side, you can see that that feels and looks a lot different. And this is the part that really is gonna help with your posture, because ultimately when we're hunched over, we kind of have, like some therapists say, your emotional backpack. This is kind of our protective pose, our stressed fight or flight mode, okay, in life. Cobra Pose is a reminder to step into our power, okay, and engage those shoulder muscles and keep those shoulder blades down and back so our chest is extended and we are proud, powerful cobras. So an easy way to remember that, shoulders together, elbows squeezed tight against the body. No shoulder shrugging here, okay? None of this. Strong, back, down. Tip number 4 is to maintain that micro bend in the elbows. You really don't ever force your arms straight in Cobra Pose. Just because, one, many people will hyperextend their joints and that can just degrade the joint over time. I have a problem with that in yoga because my joints are hyper flexible. So if I bend my arms straight and lock them, that's actually creating a bad point of leverage if I was to, fall or get injured. So instead of doing that, I'm going to maintain a micro bend. No matter how flexible I am or how far I come up, I'm gonna keep that micro bend. I'm never gonna lock out my arms. And the final tip for Cobra Pose, number 5, is I want you to imagine your pubic bone pressing into the ground, okay? This pose obviously activates the heart chakra because it's such a heart opener, opening up that, upper body and the upper spine. But it's also a sacral chakra pose because your pubic bone is like rooting into the ground. And if that sounds painful for you, you want to make sure you have a supportive mat. I'm using this one from the Court Collective. It's my favorite non-toxic, eco-friendly mat. I have a whole review of all the best Cork yoga mats over on our website. I'll link it below. But this one is nice because it doesn't feel like my pubic bone and my hip bones are like pressing into the wood floor. I can anchor through them without feeling like I'm gonna, bruise myself. So when you're moving into a cobra, you can imagine your pubic bone as you engage your glutes, it's naturally gonna like rotate your pubic bone down to create that kind of anchor point, to activate that sacral chakra, and again, create a foundation because you're not tucking your toes, remember, you're not lifting your lower body like you do in upward dog. You're keeping that pubic bone down. So it's actually that in your hips and the tops of your feet are your primary anchor points, again, because you're not keeping that much weight in your hands. Now, to round off our Bhujangasana guide, I want you to avoid these common mistakes that people make in Cobra Pose. I've mentioned them before, but let's just highlight them again, okay? So the number one most common mistake is the overeager yogis that want to show off. And trust me, I've been there. I just wanted to have the biggest back bend and show everyone my flexibility. And I left those yoga classes that I tried to do that actually feeling so much lower back pain and wondering like, I must be doing something wrong. So if your back hurts after doing Cobra Pose, your body's telling you you're definitely doing something wrong. It's a very easy gauge, okay? This is supposed to relieve low back pain, not create it. So, number one common mistake is going like this. Overarching, and I made that ugly face because that's kind of the flop, right? So I'm overarching, there's no support. My spine is crunching and grinding together, and my back is just not in a healthy state, okay? Anchor, foundation, shoulders, glutes, quads, feet, solid foundation, back muscles engaged, lifting from the back, not pressing into unnatural, okay? Lifting a subtle arch, not an extreme arch. Avoid that mistake and you can thank me later. So, you also want to make sure you're activating your core and entering the pose slowly. And that is the main thing that's going to prevent that overarching. So again, it's weird because your stomach is on the ground, but you can feel it, like my stomach is flopped here, but I can feel it engage. And this is just such a common theme in all of yoga. I'm sure you've heard it before, but when you engage here, you protect here. When you're flopped here, your lower back is unprotected. So when you're laying down, just imagine that belly button sucking in towards the spine, and that is going to protect your low back, not only in Cobra Pose, but in any pose, okay? So another common mistake is over clenching the glutes. I showed you how in upward dog, we have so much, so going from a downward dog to a plank pose, to a chaturanga, and then an upward dog, my glutes are like really intensely engaged. Everything is really intensely engaged because this is a strong pose. I'm holding myself lifted from the mat. But when I'm in a Cobra Pose, if I over clench my glutes, like squeeze them as hard as I can, that can also create that crunching in the low spine that we don't want to happen. So I'm not totally flopped. I'm engaged, but I'm not like clenching it to like I'm saving my life with my butt cheeks, okay? I'm just staying moderately engaged as I lift and focusing on that back strength, that lower body strength, and not over clenching and overarching. You can see a theme here. Overarching, overdoing anything. We want to be subtle and easy and flowing, elegant cobras like the snake, all right? The last two common mistakes are super easy to fix, but you don't want to splay your ankles, okay? So if your ankles are going outward in any way, that's just gonna create an unnatural rotation in your knees and your quads. So look at my feet here. I'm not gonna splay my ankles out like this. I'm not gonna splay them like this. My toes are pointing directly to the back of the room, and the tops of my feet are on the floor, pressing into the floor. Okay, no ankle splaying. And the other mistake you don't want to make that I have improperly showed you in this video is kinking my neck. Again, I mentioned I keep looking up at the camera, so I'm kinking my neck. You do not want to do that. If you're in low cobra, keep your gaze like about to your yoga mat or just in front of it. So your spine is extending, elongating along the neck, and the crown of your head is radiating outwards towards the front of the room. If you're moving into an upward full cobra, you can of course move your gaze along that radius, but again, don't kink it. Don't kink it. It doesn't feel good in the long run. Keep it all neutral and long and flowing. All right, thank you so much for Cobraing with me today. If you enjoyed this video, please comment below, like, and subscribe. Over at theyoganomads.com, you can also find so much more information about every yoga pose, every chakra, everything under the sun that you need to know to take your practice to the next level. Once again, thank you for joining me and have a beautiful day. Namaste.